Fireside Chat. We're joined today by CZ, the CEO of Binance, of course. And we were joking a little bit backstage about how we introduce our guest today. And I was joking with Alex, our producer, and he sort of was saying, do we even give this guy an introduction? But we're very honored today to be joined by none other than Mark Cuban. Mark, how are you?
I'm great, guys. How are you doing?
Good. We're doing well.
Good.
It's an honor to have you here, Mark.
Yeah, you guys set your sights higher. No honor at all.
Well, let's try to get through this first before we see about that readjustment. Awesome.
Sure.
Well, we're here today to talk. Crypto, DeFi, NFTs. I think Mark, you've been making the rounds recently in various sort of crypto outlets. And so we're happy to talk to you today about some of your various pursuits in the space. How have things been going for you?
I mean, it's a learning process. I mean, you don't just walk in and know everything. So like anything else, it takes time. There's a lot of things happening in the space, obviously, not just, in each of those spaces, right? They're all different in their own way and they're all connected in their own way, whether it's DeFi, NFTs, just basic blockchain applications, smart contracts, you name it. So I'm here learning my solidity and just trying to figure it all out.
That's awesome. Have you been doing much? Have you been diving in on the development side? You talk about solidity.
I used to write software way back in the day. I used to write distributed database applications. And so, I have a fundamental understanding how it all works, but it's changed a lot since then. So just trying to get my arms around how smart contracts work, what's fungible and what's permanent, and what variables are there and all that kind of stuff, so I can get a better business understanding of applications.
Very impressive. I think you already know more about blockchain than me. I actually don't really know how to do solidity programming.
We'll have to have the two of you in a hackathon just to see
who writes more bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. It used to be back in the day, you could just start programming and your fingers did what your mind wanted it to do. Now I have to look to see everything, and every semicolon and every bracket and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, my programming days are over.
And the solidity programming is actually very high risk. If you have a bug, there could be millions, a lot of money at stake. So it's actually very, very tricky.
Yeah. Well, when I would program, any compiled language was a problem, right? So, always lots of hours trying to debug.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being with us today. I guess, do you mind going a little bit into your background, Mark, as it relates to the crypto space? I mean, we have some sense that you're actually not new to the space. What is your journey within crypto been like?
I mean, back when Coinbase opened up, and let me take a step back. I've always been a tech guy. I had a systems integration company that I built, and like I said, I wrote software, did distributed database applications, and so that gave me a fundamental understanding of everything that was going on. And so when crypto hit, I probably 2012, I think, is when Coinbase got started, and that's when I downloaded it. And started messing around with it, and people would just send you some Bitcoin. People would send you this or that, and then when Ethereum hit 2012 or whatever, I don't remember, 2010. Started just messing around and trying to understand that. And honestly, my orientation always was kind of conflicted with crypto, because I never saw it as the potential of being a currency. I saw it being a method of exchange. I understood blockchain, and like I said, I did distributed databases, so I saw the value there. But I would always give people shit, and because everybody was saying, Bitcoin's going to be a currency, and I was never a proponent of that. But and I just followed it and tracked it, and I never really sold anything that people would give me, as they would try to, get me to pimp things out and promote things. And so I managed to accumulate some things along the way. And then I even took some flyers on some things and have bought some things along the way, some Bitcoin and Ethereum over the years. Again, stuff that I just all held. I would always get into battles with people that, Bitcoin's not going to be a currency. It's not going to be a currency. And I still feel that way. And then the whole thing went from it's a currency to it's a store of value. And, and that's what I would always say, Bitcoin is a store of value. no different than gold. It's worth what somebody would pay for it. Doesn't have a whole lot of utility. I'd rather have a banana if it came down to it, but it's still a store of value. And then what's really changed things is I got into messing more with smart contracts around NFTs. Then, that's where things really started to really blast off for me when it came to crypto. Because with smart contracts, well, let me take a step back. So as I was reading and listening more about NFTs, more just recently over the last few months, I went to mintable.app and decided just to mint some things and learn how they went. And I went to Rarible, and I went to OpenSea, and I went to others. And as I minted some things, the minute I saw the fact that you could save royalties and store a royalty, and I forget the standard for it, but you could save a royalty into the blockchain as part of a smart contract. That was the game changer in terms of me just diving in, because what that meant was any type of digital IP could be monetized, tracked, and every time there was a resale, then the original creator could participate. And to me, that was the game changer that really opened up my eyes on NFTs in particular. And then you start digging in to see what the applications were and how they work. And, you start getting into, smart chains, Binance Smart Chains and others, and Ethereum, and how layer 1 works. And like I said, I worked with networks for years. We were a systems integrator. So I know, back when we started AudioNet, when no one was doing streaming and no one knew what streaming was, we had to deal with layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. We had to deal with different types of ways of presenting streaming and doing streaming across multi-networks. And so I understood the whole layer 1, layer 2, 3, 4 concept. And so I just started digging in and just seeing the rush of applications, the competition, the hype, the challenges is interesting. But where there's interest, you can start to see, like, just in the old days, looking to write database applications to automate analog processes. That was one big step. Then you saw that move to the internet. Then you saw it move to the cloud and to mobile. And now with blockchain, I think, we're seeing a whole lot of underpinning on how these things could be applied there as well. And that's why it got me excited.
Awesome. Yeah. And I guess, CZ, you've been through several of these cycles yourself now. I think Mark talks about a lot of new sort of applications and products and things built with blockchain technology. What do you think is different about this time?
I think, what Mark just said is really eye-opening for me, to be honest. So I'm really into crypto, as everybody knows. But I actually think Bitcoin is a currency from the very beginning, and the smart contract part, the NFT part, actually I wasn't that deep into it, to be very honest, because I'm busy with Binance. So that's a really interesting aspect about like this new industry where things keep developing at a really breakneck speed, and different things attract different people. So that's really, really fascinating for me to learn. And it's kudos to Ethereum for Vitalik for inventing smart contract solidity, etc. So I think Binance Smart Chain is really benefiting from those inventions now. So from market cycles, look, the market is always going to go in cycles. There's going to be a bull cycle, bear cycle, etc. But I think this cycle, but within crypto, if we look at the cycles, every cycle is very, very different. I think Mark got exposed to crypto, actually Bitcoin, much earlier than me. I only learned about Bitcoin in 2013. In 2013, there was a Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin market. There's Bitcoin, and there's a lot of other what we call altcoins back then, but most of them did not survive. I think the only exception is probably actually Litecoin. And Dogecoin started in 2013 or 14, actually lasted. Most of the other ones did not last till now. And Ethereum started in 2013, 14. And then become popular in 2015, 16, 17. So on the 2017 bull market, it was Ethereum, ERC20 tokens. A smart contract wasn't that big of a thing. Well, ERC20 tokens rely on smart contracts, but it was like, okay, ICOs. And this time around, in this bull market, there's so many factors contributing to it now. And there's like there's number one, the inflation, quantitative easing, the stimulus packages in the traditional markets outside of crypto.
Talk about that too, because I don't think this is a hedge to any of that, right? I think it's
Sure.
completely independent, just like
Yeah.
gold, right? I mean, a lot of the perception of crypto tracks what gold has, the story behind gold, right? As a store of value, as an alternative to hedging, and people say gold has intrinsic value and crypto does. Gold has no intrinsic value other than some basic manufacturing applications. When people assigning high value to gold jewelry is no different than people assigning high value to any cryptocurrency, right? It's just
exactly.
a choice. It's not a necessity. It's not a utility.
Exactly. So I think now people are understanding that, and this time around, look, we have DeFi, we have NFTs, we have so much more. We have institutional treasury holding Bitcoin, and those are huge pools of money that's coming in. So I think each cycle we'll still go through bull and bear cycles. That's just how markets work. So, but
there's going to be a huge bear market in NFTs, and look, we saw this with internet stocks too. In the early days of the internet, everybody jumped in, and it's really a spray and pray investment approach, right? Because you're trying to find out who the real players are, and you saw that with early days. Now people will mint anything, and if you have a following, people will buy it, right?
Yeah.
People will put out tokens, and if you can sell enough of them, if you can hype them enough, then people will buy them. And just like you're seeing the tokens go way up, and then they all kind of trade in parallel. Yeah. The biggest difference between the early days of the internet and when the internet bubble burst and what's happening with tokens is one, interest rates, and two, it's a lot easier to hype a token than it is to hype a stock. There's no SEC rules per se that prevent you from doing some of these things. And so you're right, CZ, there's going to be cycles, and there's going to be big drops in a lot of these things. And at the end of the day, in my opinion anyways, the underlying technology will make a difference. And the principles in play of are they a good company doing smart things will make or break the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Actually, with that in mind, it'd be great to dive into some of the sort of specific DeFi applications and NFT applications you've taken a look at so far, Mark.
Sorry? It feels like I've looked at all of them, but there's still many more to go.
Awesome. Do you have favorite components of the DeFi ecosystem?
I don't want to really hype things at all because it's interesting because, again, going back to the early days of the internet, when I went on CNBC, I could watch the ticker. If I'm talking about stocks, I could watch the ticker and those stocks would be going up. And it's the same thing with tokens now with social media, right? People, I must have 20 wallets, right? And people, where I minted some things, that's obviously going to be public. And so people look what I put in that wallet, and that's kind of my hype box, if you will. And so, I tried, the things that I've already talked about publicly are Injective, MFT, Matic, what's the other ones? And then I'm in Ethereum and Bitcoin. And then I bought some Phantom. But those are in those wallets, so people are going to be able to see that publicly anyways. And then there's some other ones where I've invested that I'm not ready to talk about yet that are in different wallets.
So out of those 6 that you mentioned, other than Bitcoin and Ethereum, they were all Binance Launchpad projects.
Yeah, I know. You guys invest in a lot. You guys do investing, and Coinbase does investing by spray and pray too, right? So they all have these foundations, and you give a little bit of money to everybody, which kind of proves the point that it's hard to pick winners and losers yet. You don't really know which ones are going to take off because it's not just the technology side, but it's the marketing side. You've got to get people to adapt. You've got to get people to develop. You've got to get people to accept them. You've got to get people to trade them. And that's also the unfortunate side because, which marketplaces or dexes that you trade on has an impact on how people perceive a coin, which really doesn't necessarily reflect the underlying technology. And there's, and at layer one, people are trying to do a whole lot of different things. And then better than most, the battle between, okay, what's going to happen with Ethereum at layer one versus, the layer two trying to amp up the transactions per second and dealing with those issues. Then there's sharding versus using all the different multiprocessor, all these different issues that everybody's trying to make technological determinations about, but it's still too early, right? Yeah. This is the only business where you you kind of write an app, your own blockchain, let's just say a layer 1 application, and then you release a coin and you hype the shit out of it, not knowing if the application works or what the application implications are going to be, right? It's kind of a back-ass, half-word approach to dealing with technology. And so that's part of the challenge, is because no matter what it is, the hype level is always up here because it almost has to be. And then the installation, the execution side is down here, and it takes years to find out.
That's pretty much what happens to BNB. Like we launched it, we hyped it, we sold it first before we had a platform. So
it's crazy. Like you get people you get influencers, right, who have no understanding of technology whatsoever, right? Putting out, talking about different tokens, and it has nothing to do with the actual application itself. What's going to happen, and so, because writing layer 2, layer 3, layer 4 stuff is no different than writing any other software, right? And you're trying to look at applications. But the good news is, we're going to see a lot of applications that were SaaS applications in corporate America be moved over to the blockchain, and that's going to be very disruptive. And we're still seeing how to figure all that out. You're still trying to see, like Zen or Zendesk or Twilio or whatever. Pick any application that's multi-billion-dollar stocks that can you replicate them and do a better job and simplify it on the blockchain. Look at NFTs. There's no, the whole college textbook market, right? That all should be digitized and on NFTs. Is it big enough for someone to walk in and buy McGraw-Hill and say, you know what, we're done doing this old physical book thing. It's crazy that people take notes in a physical book and then take it to a used bookstore or ship it off to a website that then exchanges it for money or whatever. That's 1937 technology. And so why aren't all those digitized NFTs when you're done with the book, your digital version of the book, you just sell it, right? But the good news is the original publisher gets to share in the resale value. Those are all the changes that are going to happen. And so what I'm looking for is the fundamental technology underneath it that allows me to say, okay, these are the guys that are going to be the winners in this application, this application, this application, and just try to ignore all the hype, even though it's fun to speculate, right? Doesn't matter if it's a Top Shot, a BNB, Matic, INJ, that's all fun. Doggy coin, like I tell my son, it's all fun, but it's real money.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. And actually, I guess, Mark, as you think about kind of the current state of applications and kind of what's appealing to you, what do you see as the things that could be improved, or how do you think we get to that next level?
Well, first, there's this push-pull between Ethereum and everybody else, right? And so there's a race right now, and CZ, you know this better than anybody, right?
Yes.
What scalability?
No, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Nothing at all, right?
No.
Nothing at all. So scalability matters because a lot of these applications are going to be dependent on can you scale. And, some people that live Ethereum, 2.0 is going to make it work. Others say layer 2, we can work around it and we'll bridge. You guys have with Smart Chain say, look, on one hand, I see what you're doing and it's smart in that with Smart Chain, just bring every application, right? Something's going to stick. It's a numbers game. So you just throw everything at it and you hope something sticks, and then that scales. And then, you're very big on messaging, and that's important too, because perception's reality. And so you see this, I see all kinds of Shark Tank type marketing things with what you guys are doing with BSC, right? And so, but that's part of the push-pull, trying to figure out, can there be multiple players? I think there'll be multiple players, right? Will all the layers evolve so that they can coexist? Yeah, the layers will evolve so they can coexist. Just like there's different codecs, when you do video, just like when you do artificial intelligence, there's multiple types of neural networks, there's GANs, there's CNNs, right? There's reinforcement learning, there's all this stuff that applies. I do a lot of computer vision stuff. And so, there's going to be multiple winners, but it's still so early in this race that everybody's trying to grab all the markers that make them look really powerful, and that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
I think Mark mentioned the real challenge I saw as well, which is so I define it a little bit simply more as a scalability. I think right now the technology is good, it's decentralized. I think the concepts work, it's proven. But for real mass adopted applications, we need to handle much larger volumes. Right now, most of the popular blockchains cannot handle that type of volume. So I think with Binance Smart Chain, we got really lucky. It just came out at the right time, and when Ethereum is relatively congested and the fees are high. But I fully agree with what Mark said, which is there's going to be multiple players. There's going to be multiple dimensions as well. They can be multiple layer ones, multiple level zeros, layer ones, layer two. So there's going to be a lot of different trial and errors. We'll see how it turns out. But basically, there is a bit of marketing, there's a bit of hype, but fundamentally, we got to build products that people use.
Yeah, you know, what you guys are doing with BSC reminds me a lot of the early days of the internet with streaming, right? So back in 1995, no one knew what streaming was. You had to download a TCP/IP client. You had to have a 56K modem, believe it, remember those things. Yeah. And you had to download an audio player, right? So you had to go through all these steps, right? And so it was a hassle, but the value proposition was there. But we had to prove that it could scale, you know. And so we would put on these bigger events to try to get, you know, with audio, we would get 50, 60, 100,000 simultaneous listeners, which was no problem. But as you got to video, you know, to try to get 10,000 simultaneous viewers, even if it was just postage stamp, that was hard. So you had to do proof of concept things to show that you could scale the network in order for people to have confidence to do business on it. And so I see a lot of the similarities with what you're doing there. And, you know, just trying to get those TPS numbers up high, and you guys like to brag about them, and that's smart, right? Because there is an application somewhere, you know, that says, okay, how am I going to decide whether or not I'm going to use BSC or I'm going to use Ethereum? Do I wait for 2.0? Do I use Matic? Do I use, you know, Near? Do I use, you know, whatever, right? And so, or with Solana, I forget. I'm still learning on, right? And so, you know, trying to make those business decisions, because right now we look at the price of a token as reflecting the success of the underlying application, right? And that's not really the way it should be, right? That's, again, back-ass half-words. And so we play out all these hype games are being played. And like I said, it's fun to track the value of BNB versus this versus that, right, versus Ethereum. And we use that as a reflection of the quality of the underlying technology, but it's not, right? And that's part of the challenges right now, because longer term, the winners are going to be the ones with the best technology that can enable the most applications and be the most disruptive. And at its heart, you know, blockchain is incredibly disruptive. Smart contracts are incredibly disrupted, particularly because they're public. And, you know, we don't need to rehash. You guys all know that. And so I'm trying from my end as an investor, as someone who likes to fuck things up, to disrupt things. I'm looking to see where the best places are to say, okay, you know, you guys talk about the price of tokens. That's all noise, right? You know, the money's real money, right? When you talk about the multi-billion-dollar valuations, and everybody in this industry does the exact same thing that we did back in the early internet days when we were public, which is mark to market, right? I own this many tokens, you know, how much am I worth today, and all that kind of stuff. And that's human nature. But 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when, to your point, CZ, all that market has gone up and down, and, you know, bear market, bull market, and all these different cycles, great technology will be sustained, and there will be applications written on them that change the game. And that's really what I look for.
Yeah. So I mean, I talk about price a lot. Well, number one, because it actually helps our business when people care more about price, because it creates more trading activity. But also a little, as you mentioned earlier, a little bit of hype at the beginning is actually quite important to bootstrap the value of the coin, which actually gives the project more resources to work with, then more funds to hire developers, etc.
You keep on issuing coins, right? And you get to pay your APY, you know, and it's kind of crazy. But let me just remind everybody of this. One of the best lines ever, the risk does not leave the system, right? It gets pushed around a lot, but it never leaves the system. And so, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Totally. And actually, you preempted a question I was going to ask. I think there's obviously a lot of comparisons that get made between kind of the early internet and kind of the current crypto ecosystem. Are there other, are there other like comparisons you see and either really, really stark similarities or really stark differences? Like maybe what's different about it this time too?
There's not a lot different about it. I mean, the biggest difference is the SEC, right? Because most of the internet and the ensuing internet bubble was done through public companies. And effectively, there's tokens are not equities at all. And I'm not suggesting that, but they're tradable, right? They're tradable assets that go up and down in value. And when something can go up and down in value and people want them to go higher, they're going to hype them. And they're going to play games to get those prices up there. And, the way DeFi is working, there's a lot of amazing things to DeFi. I love DeFi because, every Bitcoin, every Ethereum that you own, to use those two as an example, not to exclude BNB, but those two in particular, you're a bank, right? And you can lend, you can borrow, and it's decentralized if you do it right, so that you have a lot of power and the friction is reduced considerably versus traditional banking. And, when it comes to exchanging value with somebody else, it's easier than Venmo. It's easier, because there's nobody, it's not centralized, right? And so I think the impact there is incredibly dramatic. And you'll start to see societal influence as a result as this grows. And so while there's a lot of hype, and a lot of this yield farming, I think, can be challenging and scary, right? Because when the underlying factor, when people are chasing liquidity, and you guys have to deal with this, so tell me if I'm wrong, CZ. I'm still learning this, right? When you chase liquidity and trying to find balance, right? Because you're trying to get all the pairs lined up. If you don't have enough DAI, you've got to go pay to get DAI. If you don't have enough Tether, you got to pay, or other tokens, right? If you don't have enough BNB, I got to pay more for BNB. But the yield returns are in the tokens themselves, right? And so, even though you set a limit, it's almost like the stocks that keep on giving out options and warrants, right? Where even though your treasury has a limited amount, you're paying people to do this. And, people underline just resell those tokens, and then they just go out into the wild, if you will, and just increase the total number of tokens being exchanged. And that's not really creating fundamental value, right? That's just trying to get money to move around. And you guys have dealt with that with what's it called, pancake swap and syrup, and you saw that shit, right? Just pancake and syrup. It cracked me up. But, so there's a lot of shifting money around and a lot of chasing money, and it's a game of musical chairs at some level, right? And so when somebody can't pay the toll, or somebody can't, when you get tokens who aren't exchanged, then it's going to be a problem. So what I think is going to happen, I'd be curious what your thoughts are. I think new tokens are going to have to bank. They're going to have to put up, stable coins to say, and maybe it's happening already. Binance, I need for you to change to do swaps on this. And so I'll put up 1 million stable coins, tethered to the USD, and you'll trade this for me. And as long as everything works, I'll make up your deficit. Are you guys starting to see that at all, or do you just do it based off of volume and interest?
So there's a couple points you mentioned there which are quite interesting. So I fully agree with the fact that I think DeFi will stay, the liquidity pools will stay, but the token incentives, the new token incentives with high APYs, I always said that's not going to last. I think you put it in a different way. It's just sort of pushing risk into different places. So there will be a few projects who can last, who can get users, and then they will have lasting value, and their tokens will have value. But that's they may have bootstrapped themselves from using a token to be an incentive to get some more users. But fundamentally, just giving high APYs on new tokens doesn't work in the long run. Right. And on the so we have a concept which is basically what you described. On Binance.com, for the projects that we're not so certain, for especially newer, higher risk projects, we actually ask the project to make a security deposit with us before we list them. So, right. So this is not a listing fee. We tell them, look, there's a few conditions. If you don't trigger them, we return the insurance deposit over a period of time.
Like, I mean, when you do that, you're doing your own version of DeFi, right? And you've got to over collateralize the new token. It just makes perfect business sense. You got to do it.
Yeah, so we actually do have that for some of the listings. Depends, like some hot coins, like for example Uniswap, we just listed it because it's a very hot project. Right. But for other smaller, less popular projects, with less certain, especially new ones, we do ask for it. And if the price drops significantly, we take away the insurance. If the security hacks or if the security issues, double spends or rollbacks on the blockchain, we also could suffer damages, etc. So we do have that concept, which is really interesting that you are thinking at this level of depth. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
And I always look at the money. I'm a shark, right? You know,
yes,
I always take the Shark Tank. Friday nights on ABC, by the way. Take the Shark Tank approach. You know, how's the business going to work, right? Yeah. How is it going to sustain itself? And you can't take all that risk. It'd just be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going off script here a little bit, but have any of the other sharks explored crypto or the blockchain and its various applications?
Kevin has, Mr. Wonderful. I hate calling him that. But I think he has some. But Kevin's not technical. You know, there's different layers. Some people just trade to trade because they like to trade anything, right? You know, they're gamblers by nature, or they're investors who just follow momentum plays. There's technical investors, and I think Kevin's more of a technical investor.
Interesting.
Totally. I feel like the NFT based royalties and stuff, I feel like that would be with his desire to structure deals, that might be his thing.
I still have to explain what, digitizing IP is, right? But once he gets that, he will, right? Because to me, it's such a game changer. You know, think of it not so much in terms of artwork or music or photography, but think of it in terms of every piece of information of IP that a company owns. You know, you could publish a patent there and set it up to be licensed and convey different rights. You could take whatever type of work you've done within your organization and publish it onto the blockchain and let people buy it and see value there. Things that don't have a way to be monetized right now can be monetized. And now the market still has to grow. Otherwise, you've just got, there's just no buyers. But once people recognize that it's a better way to exchange IP in a lot of respects, I think a lot's going to change.
Yeah, and once those people realize and move those new use cases into blockchain, the industry will have to grow because the price have to go up to represent those type of larger value.
Right, that'll be the interesting part, right? Because the tokens themselves don't necessarily have to represent the underlying technology, right? That's a fundraising mechanism more than anything. Right. So if I'm selling something let's just say I'm putting transcripts, academic transcripts from a high school on the blockchain because it's just easier. I can charge, in any type of digital coin, right? And most likely I'm going to do it on a USD basis, and a stable coin than I would trying to get someone to buy my own token, right? Because that creates its own complexity. So if I have, I went to a Mount Lebanon high school, so I'm not going to have a Mount Lebanon high school token. There probably shouldn't be a high school transcript token, from the company who created that technology or created that application. But I should be able to accept, a stable coin or, the most prevalent stable coins, because people still, in regular business are going to think in terms of dollars and fiat, not in terms of ETH, BNB, or whatever coin are created. So I don't know necessarily that application usage is going to drive values of coins when it comes to top layer applications, right? But at the same time, I can see, in the interim, as it's a way for people to invest in those new technologies in anticipation. And I think that could be, and I hadn't really thought of this before, one of the other conflicts that's starting to happen as I look at investments. People just want you to buy coins, as the equivalent of being an investment, or tokens as the equivalent of an investment, but it's not, right? You don't participate in the equity. The tokens, may or may not do well, but the equity in the company, if the application does well, will. And so there's going to be a little bit of that conflict. And so will it turn out where you get governance issues, revenue shares? That'll be the interesting part to see how that plays out. If you're going to use tokens as a way of representing, quote unquote, governance and ownership, then you're going to have to share some of the upside in terms of profit, sales, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I think that brings a lot of really interesting models in, because we now have crypto, and many of the projects don't have equity, so they just have tokens, and so that's also a really interesting aspect. How do you evaluate? How do you value those tokens? What formulas do you use? I've seen a lot of different formulas, but none actually make that much sense to me. So that's another interesting aspect.
Right. I mean, because how do you share, right? Because a lot of them are created as foundations, so they don't have to deal with that, right? Or nonprofits, so they don't have to deal with that. But if they're going to write applications and they're going to try to sell those applications, it's going to require, investment at some level, and people are going to want to return. And like going back to what you said originally, CZ, the boom and bust cycles of pricing, equity holders don't, want to, and I can't call them equity because it's not equity, right? But people want some level of return that reflects the business underlying it.
Yeah, and in the crypto case, the way I view it is people want to see more increased usage. The more users there are, the more valuable that token is.
Yeah, because that's the way the game is being played, right? So here's like, I wrote blog posts on blogmaverick.com years ago, 15 years ago, and I said, if you put 2004, I think I wrote a blog post, said if you put a Mickey Mantle baseball card on your desk and you put a share stock on your desk that doesn't pay dividends, there's no difference between the two. Right. Yeah. All that matters is what somebody's willing to pay for it. And analysts for stocks and even people who trade baseball cards create narratives, right? Price earnings ratio. That's just a narrative to sell a stock, right? Growth ratio, PEG, price versus growth, earnings growth. Those are just narratives, right? That people use to try to sell stocks. We use, back in the early days of broadcast.com, we use visitors, traffic, right? And scalability of our network and amount of contact, just narrative to sell a stock. And it's the same thing now, right? TPS, right? Narrative to, to sell a token, right? Number of users, get how many people can you get on your DM? Just a narrative. Yeah. So we're in that narrative stage still, which is normal for the early days. That's really when you're looking for these markers to reflect value. That tells you it's still the early days of what's going on. So to your point, CZ, it'll be interesting to see how this transitions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. And Mark, in terms of what, I think we've talked quite a lot about NFTs, like in terms of what you've done in the space so far, I heard a story about you minting a token on Rarible, and what sorts of NFT adventures have you gotten into so far?
I've minted a bunch of stuff where I've played with it and sold them on Mintable.app and Rarible.com and OpenSea.io. And so I started off where I just took a GIF file of me walking into a Mavs game to go work out, and I put up 10 of them. I think at $25 each, whatever the equivalent ETH was. And I'm like, no one's going to buy this shit. And bam! Not only did they sell, but they kept on being retraded, and I only set my royalty at 10%, I think, at that point. And I was like, oh my God. And then I tried some other things. So then I created my own version of Cameo. Do you guys know what Cameo is? Cameo is an app/site where celebrities, where you can go and ask a celebrity to record something for you. So you can go and ask Mr. Wonderful, would you record, say happy birthday to my friend Sam, and I'll pay you $500, right? Okay. So what I did, I said, okay, I'm going to create my own version of Cameo. And so I created a little video that I minted. I think this one was on Rarible. And I said, if you buy this, and it was the equivalent of $2,500 in ETH, if you buy this, I'm going to unlock a special email address that I created specifically for this token. And you can send me an email and I'll customize a video just for you. And bam, sold them out in a heartbeat. And they even resold. And I think I sold all of them in 22 minutes. And I got some really cool videos that I sent out to people. And so, just trying to experiment with different ways that this works. I worked, and so in terms of just buying other people's NFTs, I bought one, Ellerbeat. I forget, it's a generated music and art that I thought was really cool, that also used the bond curve to set pricing and to set reserves. And they set the reserve at 90%, which meant, okay, I'll buy one or two of these because, there's a really good chance I'll get my money back if they sell these out. And so I bought some of those. I bought a hash mask simply because I wanted to see how the NCT works. I bought a bunch of Top Shots, but we can talk about Top Shots a little bit with Flow. They obviously are having some of their scalability issues, and I don't know if it's the Flow that has trouble scaling or just the application itself, because I think that they just got overwhelmed with volume, which is a high class problem to have, right? You'll deal with that because you can fix that. But it's interesting now because there's so much heat around it that the prices for the Top Shots, when I got in, I was buying them all up for $2 and $3 each. Now the lowest price is $30 each. So it'll be interesting to see if new kids coming in think that's too expensive or it's worth it. But the bigger picture is that, collectibles from the NBA and other sports organizations, music, whatever, there is a market there. And the good thing about Top Shots that I think was just brilliant is, you don't have to think in terms of a wallet. You just bring your credit card. And you guys at Binance have done some of this as well, right? Where you just all that matters. And, they don't have to deal with the know your customer stuff, right? And, and so because they're not dealing with financial assets per se. And so, I'm trying to not learn too much about FinCEN, but I'm learning more than I wanted to. And so, it'll be interesting to see how that drives people to the market and what people do with Flow, and whether or not, they'll allow people to take, and get access to the moments, they call them, their NFTs on Flow.
Actually, that's a really, really fascinating story you just explained there. I think myself included, I actually have not gone and minted my own NFTs. I received a bunch and bought a few. Just playing with it, but that's a really fascinating story, actually. I think, and also especially with Flow and NBA doing their sales of NFTs, and you yourself selling NFTs, really giving NFTs a lot more exposure. And there's some really interesting use cases that have not been really sort of executed. Like concert tickets can be NFTs because they're one per seat. Sure. And then there's a new idea which you actually alluded to. People in Japan are suggesting using NFTs as a deposit voucher for exchanges, because again, as you said, selling NFTs is really easy to get anybody can sell it. There's not a whole lot of licensing around that. But they carry value, right? As you said, they represent value. Why could we use that as a deposit voucher? So a lot of those really interesting ideas are coming up. Yeah, it's interesting because anything that's perishable, an NFT can do better, right? A ticket, right? Something that if you don't use it, you lose it. Whether it's an airplane ticket, a sporting event ticket, a concert ticket, and there are a lot of companies that have been working on blockchain versions of ticketing. It's just a question of what's the best application of it and how do you integrate it with everything else that a concert venue or sports event venue does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. And so one more sort of longer form question here before we get into what we call our quick fire session. Sure. But I guess we've talked a lot about applications tonight. We've talked about DeFi and NFTs. I think more generally, Bitcoin has hit $1 trillion in market cap. Companies are putting it on their balance sheet. Mark, from where you sit in kind of the business world, are you noticing a sentiment shift? Do you think it's a meaningfully different sentiment shift? And how are people's perceptions of crypto and blockchain changed from where you sit?
It's not a shift, but it's an awareness. right? In other words, I don't see companies rushing to put Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything else, BNB or anything on their balance sheet, right? Not at all. But I am having conversations with people asking, why would Tesla do that, right? What is this guy at MicroStrategy doing, and why? Why are they holding these things on their balance sheet? And, then that eventually turns into a conversation about gold and, how people perceive gold. And, then that turns into a conversation, well, should sovereign nations, that hold gold sell part of their gold and move it into crypto? And honestly, I'd be all for that. Not all of it, right? But holding gold in Fort Knox in the United States of America is ridiculous. It has absolutely no impact, no value whatsoever, except kind of, just like you guys, on your BNB probably treasury a lot of BNB, right? Because it kind of reduces the outstanding float. So I haven't got a lot of discussions there at all. Where I've tried to push discussion is, rather than people treasuring Bitcoin or whatever, is understanding the impact of smart contracts on their business. Because if you can show a company that they can become more efficient by using blockchain and smart contracts and reduce their cost and hassle factors and reduce friction, then that'll take them in the direction of understanding the value proposition, like CZ said, on a variety of tokens, and seeing where, the play with tokens, if there is one for them. But more importantly, understanding introducing the applications into their businesses to become more efficient. That's one That's one thing. The other part is using DeFi for corporations, right? If you just set up a wallet and you buy some crypto, and even though it's over collateralized, that's typically not a problem for a decent, even a bigger small company, right? 10, 20 million or more in sales, up to huge companies. And so if where I've tried to move the conversation is not to treasury it, but, even a big company, like even me, right? If there's a bank that I have a big account with and I want to borrow something for a mortgage or whatever, I still got to talk to somebody. I still got to deal with it. And then I have to DocuSign stuff. And I'm trying to convey to entrepreneurs and CEOs, big and small, that just by holding some of this crypto and using DeFi, you're good, right? It takes you 15 seconds and, you can borrow up to 50% and you're set, and once you build and build and build, you can go see CZ and he'll let you, your collateralization rate will be even higher, right? He'll work with you, and then that leads it into how do you collateralize and how do you DeFi against your receivables, because it'll be cheaper doing it that way. So, that's really where the conversation is starting to occur. How do you implement these things to really monetize IP with NFTs? How do you start using smart contracts to change your processes? Because can you become more efficient and friction free? And then finally, using DeFi within a corporation. Now, if you look at it that way, as opposed to just, because Elon is Elon, right? And Michael Saylor is doing it his way, and kudos to him when it works. And so for everybody else, it's got to make business sense, and it's got to really have an impact on their operation. And I truly believe, look, and I've been through a lot of wholesale changes, right? Like I said, in the early days of PCs, when people didn't think they needed PCs, to being one of the first local area network and wide area network integrators, when people didn't think they needed to connect them locally, let alone globally, to the internet, to mobile, to you name it. This is going to have just as big an impact. But you've got to convey the applications from a business perspective to show the impact it'll have in this business. Because once you can prove that it'll impact their efficiency, their productivity, and their profitability, it's over. That's when. So to answer your question, Colin, it's not so much looking at Tesla and MicroStrategy and saying they did it. That's pretty much meaningless, honestly. Look, it creates demand, and all hodlers love it, because anything that creates demand makes the price go up until a whale sells and you get flash crashes like we see now. But the underlying principle that's critical is, if we introduce crypto and smart contracts and blockchain, regardless of whose they are, into corporate America, and companies start getting productivity and profitability advantages and competitive advantages over other companies because they're doing this. That's what changes the game. All the other stuff is just mishigas, right? It's just stuff, right? It's just trading, and it's just talking, and it's narrative, and it's fun to a certain extent. But it's not really the truly impactful stuff. And I'm involved in this not because, hey, let's see if I can make some money hyping and trading and this and that, but more because I see the intrinsic value and the corporate value and the fact that it can be disruptive. And that's what gets me excited. And that truly is the conversation I'm trying to have now with C-suite executives.
Yeah, it's really fascinating listening to you, Mark. I've done a session like this with Microseller as well. And you guys, it's interesting that you guys actually focus on very different parts of the crypto ecosystem. Microseller is very much a Bitcoin bull, just corporate treasury management, which I still think is valuable and meaningful. You guys are focused at very, very different parts. But I believe both are very valuable. Both are really, really interesting.
Why do you, because again, the big part of crypto I disagree with is the fact that it's a hedge, that it's against an inflation hedge. There's no correlation whatsoever between what the dollar does, other than if people buy more, right? If there's more dollars out there, maybe they'll buy more, but if interest rates go up, if interest rates were 6% right now, crypto would be lower, because you could get risk-free money sitting in your bank account, and so I think, and not just crypto, but stocks as well, and so, to me, all this discussion about it being a hedge, fiat is going to be destroyed, and all this, nah. Crypto works because it's a great application for certain things, and it can have a ubiquitous impact in corporate America, right? It can have DeFi can have a ubiquitous impact to making finance easier and better for everyday citizens. Crypto can have an impact with decentralization to making things fair. Crypto can have an impact because it can take people who otherwise can't get appreciable assets and allow them to get appreciable asset. I'm sorry, they can otherwise can't get appreciable asset, and allow them to get an appreciable asset that's been fractionalized into Satoshis or whatever it may be, right? And to buy 1/100th of a Bitcoin or BNB or Ethereum, and that's not something that you can do otherwise. And to me, those things are all game changers. And the whole narrative about it being a hedge to inflation just doesn't hold at all. Makes a great story.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. It makes a great story, right? And I can see why people want to do it. But, I just, to me right now, and maybe history will prove me wrong, right? Maybe we'll see as inflation increases, people put their money into to crypto, and all those prices accelerate, which by definition is, inflation. But I don't think this has any significant advantage because there's, contractual limits to contractual scarcity.
Yeah, I actually do have a slightly different view on that. I do believe Bitcoin is a better form of money, and just because of that, you will have the intrinsic ability as a safe haven asset. But safe haven or not, that's just safe haven. It has to be related or benchmarked to something else. But for me, like even just Bitcoin, crypto, like I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency has some advantages. Bitcoin itself, especially, is just a better form of money.
You can convey and transfer value, right? Yeah. It's far better than fiat, right? Because of all the friction that the system introduces, right? But that doesn't necessarily make it a hedge, right? So if you want to transfer, value to somebody around the world, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, far better. Not even close. But if you just want to hodl thinking this is the ultimate inflation hedge, it's great when interest rates are low. We have yet to see what happens when interest rates are high.
Yes, that's true. So I guess we'll find out if that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll know when we know, right?
Yeah. I think we lost our moderator. Colin, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear and see me?
Yeah. Oh, your video's frozen, but we can still hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, that's the only part you need anyway. So, I guess we do have a couple community questions here.
Sure.
Would love to get your take there. So the first one, and I think we kind of in this last piece of the discussion, we kind of circled it, and I think Mark, you referenced it early on. But at Rabindeck asks, will cryptocurrency ever be mass adopted as a transactional currency?
Yes, I can answer the question. Yes.
We look out for as a global market, as global market disruptors coming out from crypto?
So the part I heard, sorry, I dropped you a little bit there, Colin. But so cryptocurrency depends if you want to have a sovereign digital coin and call that cryptocurrency, right? Will there be a USDC issued by the Treasury? Yes, just like you're seeing in China and other places as well. Why? I don't, and also realize, let me take a step back. 99% of transactions right now are digital anyways, right? You're not handing physical money anywhere. Credit cards are all digital, right? It's just that there's a lot of friction because of the way the system, the legacy of banking has been set up. And so going to a USDC issued by the Treasury makes perfect sense, right? And so that's why I don't think Bitcoin, that's another reason why I don't think Bitcoin per se is a treasury, even though to CZ's point, I do agree it's easier to transfer. But once we'll have to get to USDC because look, it costs more than a penny to make a penny. It costs more than a nickel to make a nickel. It costs more than a quarter. And, making dollar bills and dealing with all that, we'll get to the point, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe 50 years. I don't know when, but we'll get to the point where it's a lot more efficient. And plus now with the pandemic, people barely even want to use cash. Nobody wants to use cash. It's scary when you have to pull a dollar bill out of your pocket and get change from somebody at a store. Nobody wants to do that. So USDC makes perfect sense as a sovereign issued digital coin. And I absolutely think that'll happen.
Cool.
Totally.
I kind of agree.
Oh yeah. Sorry, CZ.
Go ahead, Colin.
Awesome. One more from the.
Oh, you've gotten better looking.
Yeah. It's okay. I'll just switch to audio for the time being. No worries. Yeah. At LuluKit asks, what is your take on blockchain gaming and the incorporation of NFTs into gaming? I think that's actually certainly a hot category we maybe haven't touched on just yet. Yeah.
Look, video games have used tokens for years, just, call them different things and cashless currency for years. It might be Fortnite Gold, it might be whatever. And so that it's a given that it'll be used. It's just a question whether or not the biggest publishers want to, go to blockchain, and they'll make that decision based off of whether or not it's more effective for their company or not. If they can continue just using gold, which has a big burn rate, so if Fortnite keeps on just using, their own currency, the burn rate is huge, right? Because it's not really tradable after the fact, which means they make, it's like a gift card, right? What's not spent, they keep, even though on their balance sheet, they might have to deal with it differently. It's still cash in their hand. And so it really comes down to the business case more than anything else.
Yeah. And I think at this point, it's similar with our air miles. So there's so much unspent air miles where if they bring it also the blockchain, they may be a huge cost in that sense to the guys issuing it. Mm-hmm. So, but the first ones who issue it do have that significant advantage, saying, "Look, we're the ones." Then they move that advantage to the users, which is now is more transparent and everything. So I think it's going to happen sooner or later. Don't know who's going to do it first, but it's going to come. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. And I guess as a final question from the community here to close things off, SDub 2019 asks, Mark, why are you so passionate about things? What drives your passion?
One, I'm competitive as shit, right? I just love to compete. And when I started out, I was always the youngest. Now I'm not the youngest anymore. And so I'm really competitive, and I like to learn new technology. And when something gets me really excited, I've been through a lot of disruption phases, right? Or disruption cycles. And I've seen where they've worked and where they haven't worked, and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And it took a while from my perspective, for the smart contracts and the layer ones or layer zeros to really start to take hold. But now that I see them, and now that we're seeing applications that really enable them, it's exciting. And I think, to CZ's talked a lot about, and I agree that we're in a proof of concept mode right now.
Yeah.
And part of the challenge is, it's not mainstream yet. And you guys asked about that as well, right? It's not mainstream. There's a tight community, and it's almost misleading because it's a global community. And here in the United States, we really tend to be, we not understand that what's global, we think it's all United States driven, right? When it's not, right? That's just how people here think. And so a lot of it, particularly here in the States, there's a long way to go. It's just tiny. It is tiny. And when you look at whether it's NFTs, whether it's token purchases, we also look at social media. We get on Twitter, right? Or we go, and you see all these people talking about it. And it's really misleading because it makes it seem like it's really big when it's really tiny. And then you go on the Discord server, or and you see 350 people talking about it, right? It's relatively tiny. And so there's a long way to go. And so that's why I'm excited, because we barely scratched the surface. That's why I keep on, making this the equivalent of late 94, early 95 with the internet, because it's that same level of excitement. The people in the community got it, right? And we were all searching for new applications. In my case, it was audio and video, and everybody told me I was crazy. I can't tell you how many times I heard this internet thing. I mean, dude, I'll just turn on the radio. I'll just turn on my TV. I just got satellite TV. It's brand new, right? I can get it from anywhere. You're crazy. You're wasting your time. And so when you're at that point, you're in there at the right point. The hard part is there's a lot of narrative and a lot of people trying to make money off the tokens. And I don't think enough people trying to understand the underlying applications and where they can be used. And as more and more businesses come in, and the proof will be in what I said earlier, if companies in particular can find ways to change their business and compete better, it's over. If individuals feel comfortable with DeFi and we get out of the liquidity chases, right, and the yield farming chase. Yield farming is narrative creation right now, right? It's liquidity chasing. And liquidity, to your point, CG, I can't agree more that is not sustainable. And that's going to be a problem. And so we've got to transition from that as quickly as possible to show people that DeFi is really personal banking. That's what it is. And we've got to have better applications and make it easier to get fiat into the DeFi platforms, even with KYC, and make it so simple that my 11-year-old or 14-year-old or 17-year-old don't ask me about, we don't have a conversation about opening up a bank account for a savings account because, put aside what the interest rates are, the negligible interest rates, but more because the lack of friction and the simplicity of it make it a better way to bank rather than dealing with the legacy bankers and the hassles that come there. That to me is why it's so exciting and why I'm all in.
Yeah, Mark, I think I'm going to quote you on what you said there on Twitter. DeFi is personal banking. I think that's a great way to summarize and conclude. And I think anybody listening to you will understand your passion and your energy level, etc. I think having you in this industry finally, I'm really glad that smart contracts brought you into this industry. You love it so much. And I think having you in this industry now makes this industry that much stronger. So thank you so much I think we're kind of up for time. I see it in the chat on the side. So thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. Yeah, thank you so much. And I was already a fan. I'm a bigger fan now.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks, CC. Colin, if I need to help you with your bandwidth, I'll send you a couple tokens so you can afford a little better bandwidth.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
it's really, really fun. I learned a lot, and that's why I like to do these. Because every time, I learned something. And so, CZ, thank you. Colin, thank you. Everybody who was watching or listening, thank you. It was really enjoyable. And you guys can follow me. I'm on social and everything to see what I'm doing. I'm always Cuban whether it's on Rarible or Mintable or OpenSea, whatever, Twitter, that's where I'm always at.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.